Grave Peril is the third book in the Dresden Files, and is generally regarded as when it gets good. That's a reasonably fair assessment. As compared to the previous books, this feels the most complete, with more moving parts that generally come together into a cohesive whole. It also sets in motion events that will influence the next dozen or so books, in addition to introducing characters who will go on to define the series. One of these is Michael, a Knight of the Cross who wields holy power and a magic sword, deriving power from angels. This is the first bit of theology in the Dresden Files, but it'll come back frequently as a theme. Michael is definitely written a bit differently here than in future books. He scolds Harry for having premarital sex and lying, in ways that feel like more of a caricature of a Christian than the man that he would become. Still, Michael is one of the few examples in fiction of the paladin archetype that really works. He is well loved by the fandom, and despite his rigidity, offers a unique perspective and tone. He also acts as a contrast to Morgan, as both share a number of traits, but despite that, they feel and act completely differently. It's with Michael that the book begins, as he and Harry are chasing after ghosts in the maternity ward. The main plot of the book deals with a Ghostbuster-esque invasion of Chicago, with the specters appearing all over the city, seemingly without cause. The inciting incident involves Agatha Hagglethorne, a young woman who died in the 1800s. She has quite the tragic backstory, as her husband, Benson, was abusive to her and her young daughter. While hiding away, she put her hand over the child's mouth and accidentally strangled them. After that, something in her broke, and she grabbed an axe and gave her husband 20 whacks, and finally lopped off her own hand that had done the deed. She presumably bled out, adding 3 to the toll. Now her ghost has reappeared and is attempting to claim more babies as her own. But because of the circumstances of her death, the lullaby she sings, along with her touch, is deadly, and Harry and Michael have to subdue her with ghost dust and magic. The book takes a little diversion here, however, as after the cold open we cut back to the start of the day and offer some background. Included in this is the fact that Harry had previously dealt with a number of ghosts, including a lumbering bestial thing in the university basement. Ghosts, while not exactly alive, will count for the toll, as when they're banished it's effectively a second death, the same as zombies or other undead. This also introduces the B-plot, where a young woman named Lydia hires Harry to protect her from some unspecified danger. She will be a victim in distress several times over, and described in overtly sexual ways that is unfortunately quite common throughout the series, although it improves slightly in later books. After that we go back to the hospital, where Harry and Michael have headed to the spirit world, the Never Never, to confront Agatha on her home turf. The world has strange physics, and magic behaves differently. The pair beat up the ghost while taking a few injuries, but eventually manage to destroy her essence, killing her. Again. They also discover mystical barbed wires wrapped around her, implying that someone is egging on the ghosts and it's not a natural phenomena. The Never Never is also the land of fairies, and specifically Harry's fairy godmother, who wants to catch up with him and turn him into a hound. Michael manages to fend her off, as well as her other dogs, but it seems like none of them are actually killed. Harry opens another portal, and they manage to escape, right into the waiting arms of the cops. They're arrested, but let out on bail, and Harry returns to his apartment, where he's given an invitation to a fancy vampire party by Bianca, who he confronted in Stormfront. Despite all the signs pointing to it being a trap, he is compelled to go due to his role as a Wizard of the White Council. After a night's sleep and some investigating, Harry is taken in by the cops, but in less than the usual rough and tumble way. They guide him to a patrol officer's home, Mickey Malone. This is where one of the narrative flaws of the book manifests, as the B-plot shifts to focus around a nightmare, a kind of spiritual ghost that ravages the minds of those it gets close to. The nightmare is Kravos, a rogue sorcerer that Dresden and the police had taken down about 3 months prior to the book's events. However, that information is doled out piece by piece, and we never actually see or really hear the full details of the raid, just parts, as well as a dream sequence. If it was the cold open instead of the hospital ghost, things would have flown more smoothly in terms of cause and effect. Regardless, Harry is able to soothe Mickey with some magic, and move on to the rest of the investigation. This involves, partially at least, delving into what happened with Kravos. It's mentioned that he had 9 victims, although little is specified about who they were, just that most were women or children. When they went to confront him, they killed the demon that he summoned, using Michael's magic sword, ensuring that it was dead rather than simply banished. In the ensuing fight, they managed to take Kravos alive, but 3 months later, just before the events of the book began, he killed himself in prison. This is a late plot twist that helps explain that the nightmare is not in fact the demon's ghost, but Kravos's. The nightmare then gets to work on Murphy, as he's targeted all of the people directly involved with his capture. He does this while taking on the form of Harry, allowing him to walk into the police station in broad daylight. After taking Murphy out, he goes after Michael, but can't get to him directly. To that end, he kidnaps Charity, who is 9 months pregnant, and uses her to lure Harry and Michael. They have a violent encounter, but everyone on both sides makes it out alive. There's still some background details to get sorted out, but then it's time for the main event of the book, the vampire party at Bianca's estate. This is where a number of important characters are introduced. The first met is Thomas, a white court vampire who is effectively an incubus, a demon that feeds on sex. For now he's a reluctant ally who betrays Harry when things get bad. But only a bit. There's also the dragon Peril, a being of immense power who nonetheless doesn't use it, for fear it would crack reality. Finally, there's the vampire of the Black Court, Mavra, a Dracula type. She describes how Michael killed her progeny, specifically her children and grandchildren. While there's not a stated number, that's at least 4 vampires slain. He says he did it because they had killed 36 members of the community, which is a definite number to add to the toll. The big issue is that while Harry was invited to the party, and Michael is his guest, Susan, his girlfriend, worms herself in without such protections. That means she is food for all of the supernatural beings around, and Harry tries to get her to flee with him. That doesn't work, and after the exchanging of gifts, it's revealed why Bianca hates Harry so much. After he attacked her in Stormfront, she was weakened, and had to feed. Her meal was Paula, a young woman who bled to death in order to recover. Unfortunately, Paula was her favorite, and she blames Harry entirely for the situation, thus she wanted to not only kill him, but to punish him and torture him. She does this by making a big show of sacrificing Lydia, who had specifically come to Dresden for help. Harry is there under guest right, and can't be harmed unless he acts first. However, he also refuses to allow an innocent to die, and so acts first and breaks his protection. Then him, Michael, and Thomas all fight their way up to the center of the room where the sacrifice is taking place. 2 vampires die for sure on the way, although numerous others have their bellies ripped out or limbs cut off. Vampires in the Dresden Files are a good deal tougher than human, and most of these injuries are superficial. Harry sets 1 vampire on fire, and it's confirmed that he died. Susan also manages to get another kill with a semi-automatic, pumping a few rounds into its stomach, and Harry says it's well and truly dead. Thomas's paramour, Justine, then gets kidnapped, and Thomas gives up to save her life, throwing Susan into the crowd of vampires. In desperation, Harry starts an inferno, attempting to burn the entire place down. He effectively does so, igniting many of the vampires. It also sweeps through their previous victims, who had been drained during the party, but no exact number are described. Leia guides them out of the burning building, but they don't manage to find Susan. Later it's discussed there were 11 bodies found in the building, although the party had dozens more. That's the number we'll have to go with. As they said, there were at least 12 human survivors, and many more vampires. Despite the sheer heat of the fire, it only destroyed half of the townhouse, and the remainder was saved. Bianca and a group of vampires are still there, along with Susan and Justine. Harry, Thomas, and Michael embark on a rescue mission, heading through Fairyland in order to take their foes unaware. This means the risk of encountering Leia, and sure enough they find her, as well as a dozen or so hounds, great cat beasts. One of these creatures is slain during the chase, and others wounded, but in the end Harry manages to escape. However, part of his brilliant plan was to eat some poison mushrooms that will certainly kill him if he doesn't get a specific antidote. Due to this, Leia simply can't turn him into a hound, as he'll be dead within a couple hours. The gambit works, and he finds a part of Fairy that connects to Bianca's mansion. He heads to the other side, right into an ambush. It turns out the vampires have been expecting this tactic, and they kidnap Harry and rape him. While the book skips over the details, based on the fragments, that is what happens. The poison in him saves him yet again, however, as they leave him alive to be eaten by Susan, who has been half turned into a vampire. If she ever eats someone and kills them, she'll turn fully, but for now she's mostly human, if a bit mad due to bloodlust. Harry's brilliant plan continues, as he confronts the nightmare, who he's finally discovered as Kravos. When he goes to sleep, the spirit invades his dreams, and Harry dies. Just for a few minutes, Buffy style, but he does actually die, so he goes on to the count. This creates a ghost of him, and he double teams with himself in order to take down Kravos in the dream world, eating him up and gaining his power back. This only works because Susan gave him CPR in the real world. Unfortunately, dealing with one foe doesn't negate the others, and he's still trapped in a vampire prison. A pair who's been harassing him all book, Kelly and Kyle, come down and try to finish the job, but don't expect Harry's sudden power surge. He burns both of them alive, encasing them in a cocoon of fire. During their escape, they come along corpses. Again, no number is used, just a pile of bloodless bodies. However, there are at least multiple from the masquerade, and multiple taken off the street previously, so 4 can be added to the toll. Bianca has learned some magic, however, and uses mind control to force Susan to come to her, and Harry is forced to confront her, along with a dozen other vampires, in the Great Hall. She offers Susan's life for his own, but he makes the same decision as he did before, throwing everything he has at her in order to save someone. In this case, however, the stakes are higher, as there is a Duke of the Red Court there as a witness, and by breaking their pact, Harry is openly declaring war between wizards and vampires. He still does it, of course. After a brief exchange of spells that leads to one vampire on fire, and the other completely evaporated, Harry runs out of steam. Instead of throwing out haymakers, he draws on the dead spirits of the house, combined with the weakened barrier between the afterlife and the real world, and he unleashes a horde of pissed-off ghosts. They destroy all the vampires, adding another 10 to the toll, as well as Bianca herself. The rest of the book is simply recovery, a denouement that finds the rest of the principal cast alive and more or less well. The exception is Susan, who has been permanently scarred by what's happened, and decides she needs to leave, despite Harry's complaints. In total in the book there are 82 deaths in 207 pages, with a death on average every 2.5 pages. If we compare this to the others in the series, we can see a steady increase. The next book involves even more fairies and a potential apocalypse, so we'll see if this trend continues. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and be well.